The Cathedral of Moonfall had never witnessed such a gathering. Sherry Bolton pressed herself against the cold stone pillar in the upper gallery, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she watched the ceremony unfold in the sacred space below. Hundreds of silver torches blazed along ancient columns, casting flickering shadows across the faces of pack alphas, clan leaders, and warriors who had journeyed from the farthest territories to witness this moment. The sacred binding. She should not have come. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to return to the small room in the archives where she had hidden for 5 days, waiting for Robin to send word. But he had sent nothing, no secret note in their hidden alcove, no whispered message through trusted friends, only crushing silence. And so she had come to see for herself. Before we get into the story, take a second to subscribe, like, and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know if this story reaches Canada, the United States, Australia, Africa, or the United Kingdom. Let me know where you're listening from. Now, let's begin. The Alpha King stood on the raised platform at the cathedral's heart, his powerful frame imposing beneath ceremonial leathers and furs. Even from this distance, Sherry could see the sharp angles of his face, the dark hair that fell to his shoulders, the commanding presence that made even elder wolves lower their eyes in instinctive deference. For 7 months, she had known another side of him, the man who whispered her name like a sacred vow beneath the blood moon. The man whose hands shook when he traced the curve of her jaw. The man who had pressed his lips to the mark on her collarbone, the secret claiming bite he had given her the night he swore she was his fated mate. When the political alliances are secured, he had promised, his breath warm against her skin, "I will announce you to the realm. You will be my queen, Sherry. Nothing will change that." She had believed him. Her hand moved instinctively to her lower abdomen, where a different secret grew, one she had planned to tell him tonight, after the ceremony, when he came to her as he always did in the quiet hours before dawn. "The candidates will now approach." The High Priestess's voice rang through the vaulted cathedral, ancient and commanding. Sherry's nails bit into her palms as 6 women in flowing ceremonial gowns ascended the platform steps. Daughters of the most powerful bloodlines in the realm. Each one trained from birth for this possibility, each one beautiful and lethal in equal measure. And at their center, moving with predatory grace and wearing armor rather than silk, walked Celeste Blackthorn of the Iron Claw Pack. The assembled wolves murmured with a mixture of approval and unease. The Blackthorns controlled the Eastern Territories, commanded 5,000 warriors, and had been positioning their daughter for this moment for years. Celeste's family didn't just seek influence, they craved dominion. Sherry watched Robin's face for any sign of the man she knew. Any flicker of warmth, of recognition, of the fierce love he had sworn was eternal and unbreakable. His expression was carved from stone. No, worse than stone. His normally vibrant green eyes were dull, lifeless, as if someone had extinguished the fire within. His movements were precise, but mechanical, like a marionette dancing on invisible strings. Something was wrong. Terribly, impossibly wrong. Robin Hamilton, Alpha King of the Northern Realm, blood of the First Pack, the High Priestess intoned, "You have heard the Council's counsel. You have reviewed the treaties and alliances. The realm awaits your choice." The silence stretched like a blade drawn across skin. Sherry stopped breathing. Her claiming mark burned beneath her dress, a phantom heat that pulsed with every beat of her racing heart. Surely he could feel it too. Surely he would turn, would find her in the crowd, would declare that his choice had already been made in moonlit clearings where 2 souls had recognized each other as mates. Robin stepped forward. His movement was wrong, Sherry realized with growing horror. The fluid grace she knew so intimately was gone, replaced by something rigid and unnatural. And his eyes, those eyes that had blazed with passion when he looked at her, seemed flat, empty, as if looking at nothing at all. Through her tears, she saw it, black veins crawling up his neck, visible for just a heartbeat before his ceremonial color shifted to hide them again. Blood magic. Curse marks. The Blackthorns had done something unspeakable. I choose, Robin's voice rang out, hollow as a tomb, Celeste of House Blackthorn. The cathedral erupted. Cheers and howls of celebration shook the ancient stones. Alphas embraced. Warriors stamped their feet in approval. The political alliance that would consolidate power for generations had been secured. And Sherry felt something inside her shatter. The mark on her collarbone flared with sudden, searing pain, agony so intense she gasped and doubled over in the shadows, her hand flying to the spot where his teeth had once claimed her flesh. It burned as if his bite was being torn from her body, ripped away by dark magic she didn't understand. Through tear-blurred vision, she watched Robin take Celeste's armored hand. Watched him raise it in the traditional gesture of acceptance. Watched the woman smile with cold triumph while the man Sherry loved showed nothing at all, no emotion, no recognition, no sign that he remembered she existed. He did not look for her. He did not hesitate. He did not seem to remember that 7 months ago, beneath a blood moon, he had claimed her as his forever. But Sherry had seen the curse marks. She had seen the wrongness in his eyes. And she carried his child, their child, growing inside her while he stood bound to another by dark magic she couldn't prove and powers she couldn't fight. A sob tore from Sherry's throat, lost in the cacophony of celebration. She stumbled backward, desperate to escape before the grief crushed her completely, before someone noticed the pregnant scholar whose world had just ended. She would not stay to watch him wed Celeste. Would not remain in the capital where she had given him everything, where she had believed his promises, where she had been fool enough to think a nobody librarian could ever truly hold the heart of a king. The archives of Silver Peak had stood for over 1,000 years, carved directly into the northern mountains where winter never truly released its grip. Sherry, or Sarah, as the elderly keepers knew her, pressed her palm against the frost-covered window of her small chamber, watching snow fall in thick curtains across the peaks below. 4 months since the cathedral. 4 months since her world had shattered. 4 months of slowly dying. Her other hand rested on her swollen belly, feeling the child move within. Strong kicks, insistent and fierce, as if her daughter knew time was running short. The severed mate bond was killing Sherry, draining her life force drop by drop like blood from an open wound. Some mornings she could barely rise from her narrow bed. Her reflection in the window showed a ghost, hollowed cheeks, dark circles beneath her eyes, skin so pale it was nearly translucent. The elderly keepers had begun leaving strengthening teas outside her door, their silent concern growing with each passing week. But Sherry couldn't rest. Not when answers lay somewhere in these endless corridors of ancient knowledge. She turned from the window and returned to her desk, buried under stacks of forbidden texts the keepers had reluctantly retrieved from the deepest vaults. Texts on blood magic, curses of binding and dominion, dark rituals that predated the kingdom itself. Her fingers, thin and trembling, traced the faded script describing the chains of dominion, a curse that could bind even an alpha king's will, turning him into a puppet dancing on strings of dark magic. The black veins she'd seen on Robin's neck, the emptiness in his eyes, the mechanical precision of his movements. Every symptom matched perfectly. A soft knock interrupted her focus. Keeper Aldrich, the eldest of the archivists, entered with his customary slow dignity, carrying the daily messenger reports from the valley towns below. His weathered face was troubled. "More news from the realm, Sarah," he said quietly, using her false name. "You should read this." Sherry took the thin scroll with hands that shook. The words swam before her tired eyes, but their meaning crashed into her like an avalanche. Alpha King Robin Hamilton's hunt continues across the Eastern Territories. 3 towns burned in the past fortnight alone. Dozens dead. The king demands information about a stolen mate, but can provide no description, no name. His rage grows more unstable daily. The council convenes emergency sessions. Some whisper of deposing him. Others whisper of darker solutions. The scroll slipped from her fingers. He was searching for her. The realization hit with the force of a physical blow. Through whatever fragments of consciousness the curse allowed him, Robin was tearing the kingdom apart trying to find her. But was he searching for his mate? Or hunting the evidence that could expose the Blackthorn's conspiracy? They say he stands in the ruins afterward, Aldrich continued softly, his ancient eyes full of sorrow. Covered in blood, screaming a name no one can quite hear. Then the rage takes him again, and he moves on to the next town that cannot tell him what he needs to know. Sherry's breath caught. The dreams. Every night for weeks, she dreamed of Robin amid flames, his face twisted in anguish, his lips forming her name in a scream that never reached her ears. She'd thought they were nightmares born of grief. What if they were something more? What if the bond, damaged as it was, still connected them across the distance? You know something of this king, Aldrich said. It wasn't a question. You've been researching curses since you arrived. And you bear a claiming mark that burns even now. I've seen you clutch your collarbone when you think no one watches. Sherry met his knowing gaze, but said nothing. The keepers had given her sanctuary without demanding truth. She wouldn't endanger them with knowledge that could prove fatal. Aldrich simply nodded and moved toward the door. The mountain passes grow dangerous, child. Wolves have been spotted in the high valleys. Hunters, perhaps seeking. The howl cut through the stone walls like a blade. Then another. And another. A chorus of predatory voices echoing through the mountain peaks, growing closer with each passing second. Sherry's claiming mark exploded with heat so intense she cried out, stumbling against her desk. Books crashed to the floor. Through the window, she saw them, massive shapes moving through the snowfall with deadly purpose, their dark forms stark against the white landscape. Ironclaw hunters. At least a dozen of them, ascending the narrow mountain path toward the archive's ancient gates. Her hand flew protectively to her belly as her child kicked violently, as if sensing the danger closing in. They had found her. And this time, there would be no escape. The archive's main doors exploded inward with a crash that shook dust from thousand-year-old rafters. Sherry spun toward the sound, heart hammering, expecting iron-claw assassins with blades drawn. Instead, a single massive figure burst through the splintered wood, his royal guard armor splattered with blood and snow. Marcus? Sherry breathed, recognizing Robin's oldest friend and captain even through 4 months of absence. Marcus Thorne's scarred face was grim as he slammed what remained of the door shut and threw the ancient bolt. Lady Bolton. Thank the moon you're alive. His eyes dropped to her swollen belly, and something like relief crossed his weathered features. We have maybe 3 minutes before the Ironclaw reaches these doors. I need you to listen very carefully. The elderly keepers materialized from the shadows, moving with surprising speed to help Marcus drag heavy reading tables against the entrance. Sherry pressed her hand to the wall for support, her weakened legs trembling. You've been searching for me. On Robin's orders. On what passes for his orders these days. Marcus pulled a leather satchel from his shoulder, his movements sharp with urgency. The king barely forms coherent sentences anymore, my lady. But he screams your name in his sleep. Tears apart anyone who claims they haven't seen you. The hunt, it's not madness. It's the last shreds of his true self fighting to reach you before the curse consumes him completely. Curse. The word fell from Sherry's lips like a stone. The chains of dominion. Marcus's head snapped up. You know of it? I've suspected for months. The black veins during the ceremony, his empty eyes, the way he moved like a puppet. Sherry's hand moved to her claiming mark, which still burned with constant heat. The Blackthorns used blood magic to bind his will. Not just blood magic. Marcus extracted several ancient texts from his satchel, their covers marked with the royal vault seal. I've been investigating since the night of the binding. Something was wrong. Robin would never have chosen Celeste willingly. I found these hidden in the Blackthorn family's private chapel, taken before they could destroy the evidence. He opened the first text to a marked page, and Sherry's breath caught. The ritual described there matched everything she'd researched, but with one crucial addition, a timeline diagram showing the curse's progression. 4 months of increasing instability. 5 months of fragmenting memories and violent episodes. 6 months. The winter solstice, she whispered, her scholar's mind immediately grasping the significance. 3 weeks from now. When the curse becomes permanent, Marcus confirmed grimly. After that, Robin will be either a mindless beast driven only by rage or a puppet king under complete Blackthorn control. There's only one way to break the chains of dominion before the deadline. A true mate bond. Completed and sealed. Sherry had read the same passages in her own research, though she'd prayed there might be another way. The curse can twist existing bonds, but cannot survive the full claiming ritual between fated mates. Which is why the Blackthorns learned you're pregnant and sent their best hunters to eliminate you. Marcus moved to the window, peering through the frost at the approaching shapes in the snow. If you die, the bond dies with you. Robin becomes theirs forever, and your child, an heir with the power to contest their claim, dies before drawing breath. The claiming mark on Sherry's collarbone flared with sudden intensity, as if responding to her spike of protective fury. Her hand covered her belly. How did they discover I'm alive? A spy in the Valley settlements reported a pregnant woman matching your description. The Blackthorns moved immediately. Marcus turned back to her, his expression fierce. But I've brought allies. 6 of Robin's most loyal guards wait in the lower passages, ready to fight. We can hold them off long enough to. The window behind him shattered in an explosion of glass and dark magic. A black-fletched arrow embedded itself in the stone wall inches from Sherry's head, its tip wrapped in pulsing curse marks that made the ancient stonework crack and splinter. Then another arrow and another, dark magic hissing through the air like serpents. Keeper Aldrich threw himself in front of Sherry as more windows exploded inward. The sanctum, he shouted over the chaos. The inner sanctum has wards older than the curse itself. Marcus was already moving, grabbing Sherry's arm to steady her weakened form. More arrows punched through the ancient walls. The Iron Claw had brought curse breakers specifically designed to shatter the archive's protective magic. Through the windows, Sherry caught glimpses of the hunters, massive wolves with dark fur and eyes that gleamed with predatory intelligence, surrounding the archives in a coordinated assault pattern. And standing at their center in human form, a figure in black armor with the Blackthorn crest emblazoned across the chest. Darius Blackthorn, Celeste's brother and commander of the Iron Claw. In his hands, he held a blade that radiated dark magic, a weapon forged for a single purpose: to kill both mother and unborn child in one strike. The Iron Claw poured through the shattered windows and broken doors like a dark flood. Marcus and his 6 guards met them with drawn steel, but they were outnumbered 3-1. The elderly keepers fought with surprising ferocity, wielding ancient staffs that crackled with dormant magic, but they were scholars, not warriors. Run! Marcus shouted at Sherry, parrying a curved blade aimed at his throat. The inner sanctum. No! The word came from somewhere deep within Sherry, from a place she hadn't known existed. She'd spent her entire life hiding, observing, recording history from the shadows. But this was her child they were hunting. Her mate they had cursed. Her future they sought to destroy. She was done running. The ancient words rose in her mind unbidden, incantations she'd read in forbidden texts during months of desperate research. She'd thought them merely academic, historical curiosities preserved on crumbling pages. But as she spoke them aloud, her voice carrying through the chaos with unexpected power, the archives themselves responded. Shadomer Antheus, guardians of the eternal word, rise. Light exploded from the stone walls, silver and gold radiance that hadn't blazed in centuries. The protective wards she'd unknowingly activated surged to life, ancient magic recognizing a true scholar who understood their purpose. Barriers of pure light materialized between Sherry and the advancing assassins, throwing 3 iron claw wolves backward with bone-cracking force. Marcus stared at her in shock. "How did you?" "I don't know," Sherry gasped, but even as she spoke, more words flooded her consciousness. The archives were speaking to her, feeding her the defensive incantations carved into their very foundations. She raised her trembling hands and spoke again, and pillars of light erupted from the floor, creating a protective circle around the keepers and guards. But the Ironclaw had come prepared. Darius Blackthorn stepped through the chaos, his curse-breaker blade raised. Where it touched the light barriers, they shattered like glass. Dark magic met ancient protection, and the dark magic was winning. "Impressive, little scholar," Darius said, his voice cold with contempt. "But we knew the archives might resist. Why do you think we brought this?" He held up the blade, its surface writhing with curse marks. "Forged specifically to end bloodlines. When it pierces your heart, it will kill both you and the bastard heir you carry. The king will never break free." Sherry backed away, her power already waning. The brief surge of strength had drained what little she had left. Her legs trembled. Her vision blurred. The severed mate bond pulled at her life force like a hungry void. Darius advanced, his blade aimed at her swollen belly. Marcus lunged to intercept, but was thrown back by 2 Ironclaw warriors. The keeper's staffs shattered against dark magic. The protective barriers flickered and failed. Darius smiled. "Any last words, scholar?" The northern wall exploded. Not from magic. From devastating, raw physical force that sent stone blocks weighing hundreds of pounds flying like pebbles. A massive shape crashed through the ancient masonry with a sound like thunder, moving with inhuman speed and primal fury. For a heartbeat, Sherry couldn't process what she was seeing. Robin Hamilton stood amid the rubble and swirling snow, but he was barely recognizable as the man she loved. Blood streamed down his face from a gash across his forehead, mixing with dirt and ash. His eyes blazed with golden madness, not the warm green she remembered, but the feral gold of a wolf who'd lost himself to the beast. His formal armor hung in tattered strips from his massive frame, the ceremonial black and silver scorched and torn. His fur cloak was singed from fires he'd set, and his hands were covered in blood that wasn't his own. He looked like a nightmare made flesh. A monster from ancient warnings. A king who'd descended into madness. Then his wild eyes found Sherry. Pregnant. Weakened. Cornered by an assassin with a blade raised to kill. Robin didn't speak. Words were beyond him now, lost to the curse that had shredded his humanity. Instead, he roared. The sound tore from his throat with such anguish and fury that the mountain itself seemed to shake. It wasn't entirely human, it was the howl of a wolf protecting its mate, the bellow of an alpha defending what was his, the scream of a man fighting through madness to reach the one person who mattered. The Ironclaw assassins froze, their instincts screaming danger even as their training demanded they fight. Robin moved like violence incarnate. He crossed the distance to Darius in 2 massive strides and caught the assassin's blade arm with one blood-slick hand. Bone crunched. Darius screamed. The curse-breaker blade clattered to the stone floor. Then Robin threw Darius across the archives like a broken doll. The assassin's body crashed through 2 wooden shelves before hitting the far wall with sickening force and sliding to the floor, motionless. The other Ironclaw warriors rushed Robin as one. He met them with savage, terrifying efficiency, all claws and fangs and brutal strength enhanced by the curse's dark power. No technique. No strategy. Just raw, devastating violence that painted the ancient stones red. Sherry pressed her hand to her mouth, unable to look away. This was what the curse had done to him. This was what 4 months of separation had created. A monster wearing the face of the man she loved, standing in blood and fire, tearing apart anything that stood between him and his mate. The battle was brutal and brief. Robin tore through the Ironclaw hunters with savage efficiency that made Sherry's stomach turn. He fought like an animal, no, worse than an animal. Like something that had forgotten it was ever human. Blood arced through the air. Bodies fell. The ancient archives, sanctuary of knowledge for 1,000 years, became a slaughterhouse. But he wasn't in control. Sherry could see it in the jerky violence of his movements, the way he turned on friend and foe alike. When the last Ironclaw warrior fell, Robin's wild eyes fixed on Marcus, who was struggling to his feet. The Alpha King lunged, claws extended. "Robin, no." Sherry's scream cut through the carnage like a blade. Robin froze mid-strike, his blood-stained hand inches from Marcus's throat. His massive body trembled violently, as if two forces warred within him for dominance. The curse commanded him to kill. His true nature recognized his oldest friend. Slowly, with visible agony etched across his blood-streaked face, Robin turned toward the source of that voice. Sherry stood among the rubble and bodies, one hand pressed to her swollen belly, the other extended toward him. Behind her, flames consumed what remained of the shattered entrance, casting her silhouette in flickering orange light. The image struck something deep in Robin's fractured mind, a pregnant woman haloed in fire, speaking his name like a prayer. His eyes flickered. Gold to green. Beast to man. Gold again. "Sherry?" The word came out broken, barely human, scraped raw from a throat that had screamed too many orders and howled too much rage. "Is it? Are you real?" Blood dripped from his hands onto the stone floor. His chest heaved with ragged breaths. The black veins of the curse pulsed visibly across his neck and face, darker than she remembered, spreading like cracks in breaking glass. "I'm real," Sherry said softly, taking a careful step toward him. Every instinct screamed danger. This was a predator barely leashed, a monster wearing a king's face. But beneath the curse and madness, she could still see him. The man who had trembled when he touched her. The man who had promised her forever. She took another step. Then another. Robin's eyes tracked her movement with unnatural intensity, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. When she was close enough to touch, his gaze dropped to her pregnant belly and locked there. His expression shattered. Something like horror crossed his blood-streaked features. His eyes went wide. His breath caught. "Ours." The word was barely a whisper, filled with such desperate hope and anguish that Sherry's eyes burned with tears. She nodded, not trusting her voice. Robin fell to his knees with a crash that cracked the stone beneath him. This powerful king, this monster who had just torn apart a dozen warriors, brought low by the weight of what he was seeing. What had been done to them both? "I didn't know," he choked out, his blood-stained hands hovering over her belly, shaking so violently he didn't dare touch. "I couldn't. I can't remember. Everything is broken. I see fragments, pieces, but they slip away like water." His voice cracked. "I've been searching for something. Someone. It burns in my chest, this need to find." His eyes met hers, green fighting through the gold. "You. I've been searching for you." Sherry knelt carefully before him, ignoring Marcus's warning sound. Up close, she could see the curse's full devastation. The black veins covered half his face now, pulsing with dark magic. His skin was feverish. His pupils dilated and contracted erratically. "What do you remember?" she asked gently, the scholar in her needing to understand the curse's progression. "The blood moon." Robin's hands finally settled on her belly, so gentle despite the blood coating them. "Your face in the moonlight. The claiming. The promise I made." His expression twisted with pain. Then fragments. "Waking in chambers I don't recognize. A woman with ice in her eyes telling me I chose her, but I don't remember choosing. I don't remember anything except that something was stolen from me and I have to find it." "Have to find," he looked up at her. "You were stolen. They took you from me." "No one took me," Sherry said quietly. "I fled. I watched you bind yourself to Celeste Blackthorn during the sacred binding ceremony. I thought you'd betrayed me." Robin flinched as if struck. "Celeste. The name feels like poison." But I can't, the memories won't stay. Frustration and rage flickered across his face. The black veins pulsed. The curse fights me every moment. Sometimes I'm myself for hours. Then it takes over and I wake up covered in blood, standing in ruins, not knowing what I've done. The towns you've destroyed, Marcus said quietly from where he stood, still wary. The people who've died. That's the curse, Robin. You've been hunting for Sherry, but the dark magic twists your search into violence. How long? Robin's voice was hollow. For months since the ceremony, Sherry answered. 3 weeks until the winter solstice. When the curse becomes permanent, Marcus added grimly. After that, you'll be lost forever. Either a mindless beast or a puppet under Blackthorn control. Robin's hands tightened on Sherry's belly, not enough to hurt, but with desperate possession. Then we break it, he said, his voice carrying an echo of the command that had once made kingdoms bow. He looked at Sherry with eyes that were more green than gold for the first time. I will fight this curse with everything I have. But I need you. The bond, I can feel it even through the dark magic. You're the only thing keeping me human. Sherry covered his blood-stained hands with her own. She thought of the destroyed towns. The dead. The monster he was becoming. The impossible odds. Then she thought of their child. The man he'd been. The future they could still claim if they fought hard enough. Then we break it, she echoed, her scholar's mind already racing through the ritual requirements. Together. The first episode came less than an hour after Robin regained some measure of control. One moment he was helping Marcus clear rubble from the archive's entrance, his movements careful and deliberate. The next, his eyes flooded with gold, and he lunged at Sherry with a snarl that was purely animal. Marcus hit him from the side, both men crashing through a damaged bookshelf. It took 3 of the royal guards to pin Robin down while he thrashed and roared, the curse fighting viciously now that it sensed its hold weakening. Sherry. Robin's voice broke through the madness for a heartbeat. Run. I can't, it's taking control. Then the gold swallowed the green completely, and the man disappeared beneath the beast. Sherry didn't run. She knelt beside his struggling form and pressed her hand to his chest, over his heart, speaking the calming incantations she'd found in the forbidden texts. The ancient words created a temporary ward that glowed faintly against his skin, and slowly, agonizingly slowly, the gold receded from his eyes. Robin collapsed against the stone floor, breathing hard. How long was I gone? 3 minutes, Marcus said grimly, releasing his hold. That's the 5th episode today. They're getting worse. They couldn't stay in the ruined archives. The Ironclaw's assault had destroyed half the ancient structure, and more Blackthorn forces would come once Darius failed to report back. But they also couldn't travel with Robin in this condition. He was as dangerous to them as to any enemy. Marcus pulled Sherry aside while Robin sat hunched against a wall, his head in his hands, fighting another wave of the curse. The situation in the capital is deteriorating, the captain said quietly. My scouts report that Celeste has positioned herself as the concerned queen, claiming Robin's madness proves the sacred binding was blessed by the moon itself, that she alone can soothe the beast. She's turning his curse into political advantage, Sherry said, her scholar's mind immediately grasping the strategy. The council meets in 2 days to consider granting her emergency powers to protect the realm from the unstable king. If that vote passes, she effectively becomes regent. It's a coup wrapped in sympathy. Marcus's scarred face was grim. We need to reach the capital before that vote. But look at him. Sherry looked. Robin was trembling violently, black veins crawling up his neck like poisonous vines. He was fighting a battle against himself every single moment, and he was losing. There might be a way, she said slowly, an idea forming from months of research. A temporary measure to stabilize him long enough to reach the capital. What kind of measure? A binding ritual. Not the full mate bond completion. We'd need proper preparation and sacred ground for that. But a temporary link between my life force and his. It would anchor him, give him something to hold on to when the curse tries to take control. Marcus's eyes widened. That's forbidden magic, Lady Bolton. If he loses control while you're linked, the curse could consume us both. I know. Sherry touched her swollen belly, feeling their daughter move within. But if we do nothing, we lose anyway. 3 weeks until the winter solstice. We'll never make it to the capital at this rate, let alone break the curse. She didn't wait for Marcus's approval. Some decisions were hers alone to make. The ritual required blood, spoken vows, and a circle of protective wards drawn in ash from the archive's fires. Robin watched her preparations with eyes that flickered between clarity and madness, understanding what she intended. Don't, he rasped when she knelt before him with a ritual blade. If I hurt you, if the curse uses our connection to, then you'll fight it, Sherry interrupted, taking his hand. Like you've been fighting for 4 months. But this time, you won't fight alone. She drew the blade across her palm, then his. Their blood mingled as she spoke the binding words, ancient phrases that created a shimmering thread of light between their joined hands. The moment the connection formed, Sherry gasped. She felt him. Not just emotionally, but viscerally, his pain, his rage, the curse clawing at his mind like a living thing. But she also felt his love, buried deep beneath the dark magic, but still burning fierce and true. And Robin felt her. His eyes cleared, the gold receding as green flooded back. The trembling stopped. The black veins faded to thin lines. Sherry, he breathed, wonder breaking through the anguish. I can feel you. You're an anchor in the storm. The journey to the capital began at dawn. Robin rode with Sherry seated before him on his massive warhorse, his arms locked protectively around her, their temporary bond humming between them like a lifeline. When the curse surged, she felt it through the connection and spoke the calming words before it could consume him. During moments of lucidity, he told her everything. Waking in Celeste's chambers the morning after the ceremony with no memory of the night. The growing horror as servants congratulated him on his choice. The moment he'd run to Sherry's room and found it empty, her few possessions gone. I knew something was catastrophically wrong, but I couldn't remember what, Robin said, his voice rough with old pain. The curse fragmented my memories. I'd have hours where I knew I'd been violated, that I'd never chosen Celeste. Then hours where I couldn't remember anything except rage and the need to find what was stolen. You burned towns, Sherry said quietly. Killed people searching for me. I know. His arms tightened around her. That blood is on my hands, curse or not. If we survive this, when we survive this, I'll spend the rest of my life making amends. 3 days into the journey, as they camped in a hidden valley, Robin pulled Sherry close in the firelight. The temporary bond pulsed between them, and through it she felt his need, not for violence or dominance, but for connection. For proof that she was real and this wasn't another curse-twisted dream. Their first kiss since the ceremony was hesitant, almost reverent. But when their lips met, the mate bond, damaged and incomplete as it was, roared to life with painful intensity. Sherry felt it like lightning in her veins, and Robin gasped against her mouth. I love you, he whispered. I never stopped. Even when I couldn't remember your name, I loved you. The bond cried out for completion, but they were running out of time. The capital had transformed into something alien and hostile. As their small party approached the city gates at dusk, Sherry felt the wrongness in her bones. Guard patrols moved through the streets in numbers 3 times what she remembered. Blackthorn soldiers stood openly at key intersections, their iron-claw insignia displayed with arrogant pride. And everywhere, plastered on walls, proclaimed by town criers, whispered in market squares, was the narrative Celeste had carefully constructed. The mad king who abandoned reason. The patient queen trying to save her people. The tragic necessity of replacing a ruler too dangerous to lead. They fear you, Sherry said quietly as they passed clusters of citizens who shrank away from Robin's approach. They've heard the stories. The burned towns. The bodies. They should fear me, Robin replied, his voice tight with self-loathing. I gave them reason enough. Through their temporary bond, she felt him fighting another surge of the curse, pushing it back through sheer force of will. Refugees from the Eastern Territories filled the lower districts, people displaced by Robin's violent hunt, their faces gaunt with trauma. They didn't know about the curse. They didn't see a king fighting dark magic. They just saw a monster who had destroyed their homes while screaming about a mate no one could identify. Celeste had prepared her stage well. The council session was announced within an hour of their arrival. Not a private audience, but a full public assembly in the Grand Hall with representatives from every major house in attendance. Marcus tried to argue for delay, but Celeste's messengers were insistent. The queen welcomed her beloved husband home and wished only to discuss his health and the realm's governance. It was a trap, and they had no choice but to walk into it. Robin sat on his throne in the formal armor Marcus had brought, looking every inch the Alpha King despite the black veins visible on his neck. The temporary bond with Sherry kept him stable, but she could feel the curse pressing against their connection like a beast testing its chains. She stood behind and to the left of the throne, no official position, no voice in council, just a pregnant scholar whose presence sparked whispers. Celeste entered like a queen already crowned. She wore mourning silver, a calculated choice suggesting sorrow over Robin's condition, and moved with practiced grace to stand before the assembled council. "My lords, my ladies," she began, her voice carrying flawless concern. "We are blessed that the king has returned to us safely. His absence has been difficult for all who love him." She turned to Robin with eyes that glittered like frozen lakes. "Welcome home, my husband. The realm has missed you terribly." Robin's hands tightened on the throne's arms, but he said nothing. Speaking was dangerous when the curse could seize his voice at any moment. Celeste continued, addressing the council with rehearsed sympathy. "However, we must face hard truths. The king's recent actions have been concerning. 7 towns destroyed in the Eastern Territories. 43 confirmed deaths. Hundreds displaced. Attacks on noble houses who could not provide information about a woman whose identity the king cannot clearly describe." She paused, letting the weight of those numbers settle. "The council asked me to address the king's instability, to offer support and guidance during this difficult time." One by one, council members stood to voice agreement. Lord Ashford spoke of the refugees flooding the capital. Lady Morven described the fear gripping the Northern Territories. Lord Valdres argued that the king's obsession with his lost mate proved his mind had fractured under the pressures of rule. As each council member spoke, Sherry watched carefully with her scholar's eye for detail. And they're faint but unmistakable, she saw them. Black veins. Not as advanced as Robin's, barely visible against their skin. But present. Pulsing with dark magic. Lord Ashford. Lady Morven. Lord Valdres. 3 others. 7 council members total, all speaking in perfect support of Celeste's position. Her breath caught. The Blackthorns hadn't just cursed Robin. They'd been placing subtle compulsions on key council members for months, perhaps years. This wasn't a reaction to Robin's instability. This was a bloodless takeover that had been in motion long before the sacred binding. The king's paranoid delusions about curses and dark magic are themselves evidence of his deteriorating mental state, Celeste said, her voice heavy with false regret. And his attachment to this random scholar, she gestured dismissively toward Sherry, who appears pregnant and claims some connection to his majesty, shows how far reason has fled him. Robin started to rise, but Sherry felt the curse surge through their bond. If he lost control now, Celeste would have all the proof she needed. "I propose," Celeste continued, "that the king be allowed to rest and recover while I assume temporary regency to protect the realm from further instability. A merciful solution that preserves his dignity while ensuring our people's safety." "I call for an immediate vote," Lord Ashford said, black veins pulsing beneath his collar. The cursed council members would vote yes. The others, frightened by Robin's reputation, would likely follow. In moments, Celeste would legally seize control of the kingdom. Sherry had one chance. She stepped forward from behind the throne, her pregnant belly obvious beneath her scholar's robes. The assembled nobles stared in shock. A nobody without rank interrupting a formal council session was unprecedented. "I invoke the ancient right of truth," Sherry said clearly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent months studying the oldest laws. "By the covenant of the first pack, any citizen may present evidence before judgment is rendered, regardless of status or position. I have evidence relevant to these proceedings." Celeste's mask slipped for just a moment, cold fury flashing across her face. "This woman has no standing. The ancient right predates your family's rise to power, Lady Blackthorn," Sherry interrupted, meeting those ice-cold eyes without flinching. "It predates the council itself. Unless you wish to violate laws older than the kingdom, you will hear my testimony." The elder council members shifted uncomfortably. The ancient right hadn't been invoked in decades, but it was indeed sacred law. To deny it would be to deny the foundations of their entire legal system. "Very well," Celeste said through gritted teeth. "Let the scholars speak her delusions. Then we vote." Sherry moved to the center of the council chamber with the careful confidence of someone who had spent her life among books and facts. She was no orator, no politician skilled in rhetoric. But she was a scholar, and the truth was her weapon. "The chains of dominion," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of every eye upon her. "An ancient blood curse created in the dark years before the first pack established order. Its purpose, to bind the will of powerful wolves, turning them into puppets while leaving their bodies intact and functional." She gestured to Robin, still seated on his throne, fighting to remain motionless as the curse raged against their temporary bond. "The symptoms are specific and unmistakable. Black veins spreading from the curse site. Eyes that shift between their natural color and gold. Periods of violent instability alternating with fragmented lucidity. Progressive memory loss. And most tellingly, the inability to remember the moment the curse was placed." Marcus stepped forward, placing the stolen texts on the council table. These were found hidden in the Blackthorn family's private chapel. They detail every component of the Chains of Dominion ritual. Components that match residues found in the sacred binding chamber, Sherry continued, analyzed by the Royal Guard's curse specialists over the past 3 months. Bloodroot ash, shadow serpent venom, and crushed fragments of corrupted moonstone, all present in trace amounts on the very platform where His Majesty spoke his vows. Murmurs rippled through the assembled nobles. Celeste's expression remained composed, but Sherry saw her hands clench at her sides. "But the Chains of Dominion wasn't the only curse the Blackthorns employed," Sherry said, letting her scholars eye sweep the council. "Lord Ashford, Lady Morven, Lord Valdres, please examine the left side of your necks. Just below the ear." The named council members reflexively touched their necks. Their faces paled as they felt the faint ridges there. "Lesser compulsion marks," Sherry explained. "Not strong enough to control fully, but sufficient to nudge opinions, to make certain suggestions seem more reasonable than they are. 7 council members bear these marks. All 7 have spoken in favor of granting Lady Blackthorn emergency powers. This is absurd." Celeste snapped, her composure finally cracking. "Paranoid accusations from a desperate woman. The Blackthorn private chambers have been warded against magical inspection for 8 months, Sherry spoke over her. An unusual precaution for a family with nothing to hide. Those wards require constant maintenance through blood rituals performed on sacred ground, which is why traces of the same bloodroot ash found in the binding chamber are also present in your family's private chapel." She pulled out the final text, its pages marked with careful annotations. "The ritual to create the Chains of Dominion requires 3 things: the target's blood, obtained through deception, a corrupted artifact to channel the curse, and the spoken consent of the victim, which is why the curse was placed during a ceremony where His Majesty was required to speak binding vows. The pieces fit together too perfectly to dismiss. Even the uncompelled council members looked shaken. But Celeste was a politician's daughter, and she wasn't finished. "How convenient," she said, her voice dripping with poison, "that this nobody appears at precisely the right moment. Pregnant. Claiming to be the true mate. With texts that support exactly the narrative she needs." She turned to address the council directly. "Perhaps Lady Bolton is telling the truth about a curse. But perhaps she is the one who cursed him. Perhaps her child is the anchor of the dark magic, and she spins this elaborate tale to deflect blame." It was a brilliant deflection. Sherry felt the council's attention shift, doubt creeping into their expressions. How could they know who was telling the truth? The chamber fell silent. Then Robin stood. The movement was deliberate, powerful, and every wolf in the room felt the weight of their alpha's presence. When he spoke, his voice carried the alpha command, the primal force that compelled truth from those who heard it. "She is my mate." Each word resonated with undeniable authority. "Chosen beneath the blood moon 7 months before the sacred binding. Claimed with sacred rites in the old way. Mother of my child, conceived in love before the blackthorn's dark magic touched me." The claiming mark on Sherry's collarbone began to glow soft silver light that pulsed in rhythm with Robin's words. It was a light that could not be faked, could not be conjured by any magic. Only a true claiming mark, given and accepted by fated mates, could shine with that particular radiance. "And if there is doubt about dark magic between us," Robin continued, his green eyes locked on Celeste's face, "let it be tested now. I call for the Moonstone trial." Gasps rippled through the chamber. The Moonstone trial was ancient law, rarely invoked, but absolute in its authority. "The Moonstone cannot lie," Robin said. "If our bond is cursed or false, the stone will shatter when we touch it. If we are true mates, blessed by the moon herself, it will bloom with light." He turned to Celeste. "Unless you object to this test, Lady Blackthorn? Unless you fear what the Moonstone might reveal." Celeste's face had gone pale. To refuse the trial was to admit guilt. To accept it was to risk exposure. But with the entire council watching, she had no choice. "Of course I do not object," she said coldly. "Let the Moonstone prove the truth, whatever that truth may be." But her eyes promised murder. The Moonstone was brought forth on a velvet cushion carried by the eldest of the council keepers, a woman whose family had guarded this sacred artifact for 12 generations. The stone itself was unremarkable to untrained eyes, a simple sphere of pale crystal, smooth and cool. But those sensitive to magic could feel the ancient power thrumming within it, older than the kingdom, older than the written histories. It was placed on a pedestal at the chamber's center. Robin and Sherry approached together, their temporary bond humming between them. Through their connection, Sherry felt Robin's determination warring with the curse's rising fury. The dark magic sensed what was coming and fought like a cornered beast. They were 3 steps from the Moonstone when Celeste made her move. She didn't speak, didn't gesture. But Sherry felt the surge of dark magic like a physical blow, raw power channeled from some hidden source, activating the curse's full strength with desperate finality. Robin's scream tore through the chamber. The black veins exploded across his body, covering his face, his neck, his hands in a web of dark corruption. His eyes went completely gold, then dead, empty windows with no soul behind them. The temporary bond Sherry had created shattered like glass, and she gasped at the sudden severing. The curse had complete control. "Kill her." Celeste's voice was barely a whisper, but the curse heard its master's command. Robin moved with mechanical precision, all trace of the man she loved erased. His hands reached for Sherry's throat with one purpose, to end the threat before she could touch the Moonstone and expose the truth. The council erupted in chaos. Guards rushed forward. Marcus shouted orders. But Robin was faster, driven by dark magic that cared nothing for obstacles. His hands closed around Sherry's throat. She didn't fight, didn't try to break free. She'd spent 4 months researching this curse, reading every text, understanding every nuance. And she'd learned its one fundamental weakness, the truth that gave her hope even now, as Robin's grip tightened and air became scarce. The curse could command actions, but it could not touch the soul. Sherry pressed her hand to Robin's chest, directly over his heart. Over the place where their bond lived, deeper than magic, deeper than blood. And she spoke the words of their original claiming, the vows spoken beneath the blood moon 7 months ago. "I claim you, Robin Hamilton." Her voice was strong despite his choking grip, carrying through the chamber with undeniable power. "Alpha King, protector of the realm, keeper of my heart. My mate, my love, my chosen one. I claim you beneath the moon's witness. I claim you in the face of darkness. I claim you, and I break what binds you falsely." The claiming mark on her collarbone blazed with silver light. And within her womb, their daughter, the child conceived in love, carrying the unprecedented gift of curse-breaking, awakened. Golden light exploded from Sherry's hand, pouring into Robin's chest where her palm pressed against his heart. It wasn't the gentle glow of healing magic or the controlled power of scholarly incantations. This was raw, primal force, the power of a true mate bond completing itself, amplified by their child's gift, fueled by love that had survived betrayal and separation and 4 months of desperate searching. The curse screamed. It was a sound like tearing metal, like reality breaking, a shriek that existed on a frequency only those touched by magic could hear. The black veins fought back, pulsing with dark power as Celeste poured more magic into maintaining control. But Sherry's light was stronger, fed by truth, by love, by the bond that had been forged beneath a blood moon and could not be broken by any darkness. Robin's hands loosened fractionally. His dead eyes flickered, gold to green, beast to man, puppet to soul. "Fight!" Sherry gasped, her voice strained. "Robin, fight it!" With a roar of anguish and desperate effort, Robin tore his hands away from her throat. Every muscle trembled with the internal war. The curse commanded him to kill. His true nature refused. The battle played out across his face in expressions of agony. "The stone." Sherry grabbed his hand, her own shaking. "Now!" Together. They stumbled the final steps to the moonstone, the curse trying to drag Robin back with every movement. Sherry's vision blurred from lack of air. Robin's entire body convulsed as dark magic fought to reassert control. They pressed their hands to the moonstone simultaneously. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Light erupted from the ancient artifact, pure silver-gold radiance that exploded outward like a sunrise, filling the entire council chamber with blinding brilliance. The completed mate bond resonated through the moonstone, amplified and reflected back, undeniable and true. Every wolf in the chamber felt it, the rightness, the ancient recognition, the certainty that what they witnessed was blessed by the moon herself. And in that sacred light, the chains of dominion shattered. The black veins covering Robin's body cracked like dried mud, dissolving into ash that disintegrated in the radiance. The curse released its grip with a final shriek of defeat, dark magic burning away beneath the mate bond's pure power. The compulsion marks on the council members snapped like cut strings. 7 nobles gasped and stumbled as their minds cleared for the first time in months. But most damning of all, the moonstone's light revealed what had been hidden. Dark threads of magic became visible, writhing like serpents in the radiance. They stretched across the chamber, converging on a single point, Celeste Blackthorn. The threads connected to her hands, her chest, her throat, marking her unmistakably as the curse's anchor, the source of the dark magic that had poisoned the king and council. Her guilt was written in shadows and corruption for every witness to see. Robin collapsed to his knees, free for the first time in 4 months, breathing in great shuddering gasps. The moonstone's light slowly faded, leaving them in the chamber's normal illumination. But no one could unsee what the sacred stone had revealed. The fall of House Blackthorn was as swift as it was absolute. Guards seized Celeste in the council chamber even as she screamed denials, the dark threads of her curse still visible to every witness. Her father and brothers were arrested within the hour, their private chambers revealing a workshop of horrors, corrupted moonstones, vials of shadow serpent venom, and detailed plans for controlling not just Robin, but the entire council through a web of compulsion curses. The trials lasted 3 days. Evidence mounted like stones building a wall of undeniable guilt. The Blackthorns had been positioning themselves for a takeover for years, placing subtle curses on key nobles, manipulating alliances, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The sacred binding had been their masterpiece, a public ceremony that gave their greatest curse the appearance of legitimacy. Lord Blackthorn was executed by ancient law at dawn on the 4th day. The punishment for using blood magic against the crown had not changed in 1,000 years. Death by silver blade, swift and final. Celeste was given a choice: execution or exile to the cursed lands beyond the northern wastes, stripped of her wolf, her magic, and her name. She would live, but as nothing. A mortal woman in a realm of monsters. Exile, she spat, unable to meet Sherry's eyes. Even facing oblivion, she could not accept that a mere scholar had destroyed everything she'd built. She was escorted to the border in chains and never seen again. The kingdom's healing was slower, more painful. Robin, finally free of the curse's influence, had to face what he'd done during those 4 months of madness. 7 towns destroyed. 43 dead. Hundreds of families displaced and traumatized by a king they should have been able to trust. He traveled to each ruined settlement personally, made reparations from his own treasury, faced the survivors and listened to their pain without excuse or defense. Some forgave him, understanding the curse's hold. Others could not, and he accepted that burden without complaint. Sherry stood beside him through every difficult conversation, every tear-filled confrontation. Her quiet strength and scholar's wisdom helped broker peace where anger festered. She established councils in the damaged regions, gave them voice in governance, ensured their recovery was prioritized above politics. The nobles watched and learned that their new queen was no decorative figurehead. The council formally recognized Sherry as queen and royal archivist in a ceremony 2 weeks after the Blackthorn's fall. She wore silver and carried not a scepter, but an ancient text, the original laws of the realm that had saved them all. Let it be known, the elder counselor proclaimed, that Queen Sherry Bolton shall guard the kingdom's knowledge and defend against dark magic's return. Scholar, queen, and keeper of truth. The wolves assembled in the grand hall held their acceptance, and this time, Robin stood beside her with his hand in hers, no curse, no conspiracy, just a completed bond that blazed with rightness. 2 months later, on a clear winter night when the moon hung full and bright, Sherry's labor began. Robin paced outside the birthing chamber like a caged wolf, Marcus physically restraining him from bursting through the doors every time Sherry cried out. When the midwife finally emerged, her face was awestruck. A daughter, Your Majesty. Healthy and strong. And unusual. Robin was through the door before she could explain, dropping to his knees beside the bed where Sherry lay exhausted but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in soft white cloth, was the smallest, most perfect thing he'd ever seen. Their daughter had Robin's green eyes, clear and bright even in her first minutes of life. Her gaze was thoughtful, observant, studying her parents with an intensity that seemed far too knowing for a newborn. When she opened her mouth and cried, the sound rippled outward with visible power. Throughout the castle, minor curses broke. Compulsion charms dissolved. Even old hexes placed years ago shattered like glass. Luna, Sherry whispered, touching their daughter's soft cheek. After the moon that witnessed our first claiming. Robin held Luna with reverent care, this tiny life that had helped break his curse while still in the womb. Tears streamed down his face, this king who had been brought to his knees by love, who had nearly lost everything to dark magic, who had fought through madness to find his way home. "Thank you," he whispered to Sherry, his voice rough with emotion. "For seeing me when I couldn't see myself. For standing in the fire and not letting go. For fighting when I was too lost to fight for myself." Sherry reached up to touch the claiming mark on his collarbone, perfectly matched to her own. Both marks gleamed with soft silver light, completed bonds that nothing could ever break again. "We stood together," she corrected gently. "We always will." Outside the castle, wolves across the kingdom lifted their voices in celebration. Not howls of political victory or military triumph, but something deeper, recognition of truth prevailing, of love surviving darkness, of a bond that had endured blood magic and destruction and time itself. The story spread through the realm like wildfire. The scholar queen who broke a curse with knowledge and love. The king who fought madness itself to find his fated mate. The bond that survived when every force in the kingdom sought to destroy it. In the archives that were being rebuilt, Sherry had already begun writing their story. Every detail recorded with a scholar's precision, every truth preserved for future generations who might need to know that darkness could be defeated. But this time, as she wrote the words in her careful hand, Sherry wasn't just the observer recording history from the shadows. She was the hero of her own tale. And their story, hers and Robin's and Luna's, was only beginning. Before you go, drop a comment and tell me, what moment hit you hardest? When Sherry watched Robin choose another with dead eyes and curse marks crawling up his neck. When she spoke ancient words and the archives blazed to life, recognizing a true scholar. Or when she pressed her hand to his chest as he choked her, claiming him even as the curse commanded her death. Could you have stood your ground as a cursed king lunged to kill you, trusting love was stronger than dark magic? Would you sacrifice your quiet life among books to stand beside a king knowing his madness nearly destroyed a kingdom? If this story of broken bonds and scholars' courage resonated with you, hit subscribe for more tales where knowledge becomes power and love survives the darkest curses. Until then, may you find the strength to speak your truth, even when the entire world tells you to stay silent.